Hello and welcome to our program. My name is Jean McGuire. I'm the Field Outreach Specialist with the Wetlands Initiative's Smart Wetlands Program. Our organizations, the Marshall-Putnam Soil and Water Conservation District, the Marshall-Putnam NRCS program, and the Wetlands Initiative are sponsoring this educational program to help farmers and landowners learn how to stop the flow of sediment, nitrogen, and phosphorus from row cropland while maintaining productivity and profitability. We have a short program today. Following this introduction, we will review the NRCS 9 Steps of Conservation Planning, followed by a time for questions, and then wrap up with some additional information on conservation planning and sustainable farming resources. Our presenter today is Dick Marshall. Dick received his Bachelor of Science in Crop Sciences from the University of Illinois and began working with NRCS in 2002 as a Soil Conservation Technician. In 2004, he was promoted to Soil Conservationist, and in 2019, he became the Soil Conservationist working with the Marshall-Putnam Conservation District in Henry, Illinois. Dick, you have the floor.
So today I'm going to talk about the 9 steps of conservation planning, kind of give you a little overview of what really the foundation of the NRCS is a little bit as we just work through the planning process in order to put a good, solid plan together on your property. If you are as a farm operator or as a landowner, to address resource concerns, to improve overall production, or if you would like to, or if your concerns are wildlife habitat, to improve the wildlife habitat on your property, or if you have nutrient concerns, there's potential where we can help address nutrient concerns, erosion. So next slide, please. So who are we? The origins of the NRCS, like it says, our agency was founded in April 27th, 1935. It was during the Dust Bowl where Hugh Hammond Bennett had been talking to Congress and basically wanted the Congress to see all, and what he did is he lengthened out his speech to show and bring Congress over to the window to show, hey, look at all this dust. This is going to be a national emergency. It's, something that we need to protect as a nation. Our agency is a federal agency under the United States Department of Agriculture that was founded under Abraham Lincoln's presidency. And then when we were formed, we were called the Soil Conservation Service. And then we evolved in 1994 to under our name was changed to the Natural Resources Conservation Service to address all the to address every natural resource, just not soil erosion. Like I mentioned, wildlife. We could be focused on nutrient management, so that's why we were renamed the Natural Resources Conservation Service. We work with local leadership and partners to address local resource concerns. Our main partner that we work with on our county level is your local Soil and Water Conservation District. There's about 97 of them, I believe, in the state of Illinois. And then also there's other partners that we work with. We work with Pheasants Forever. We also work with the National Turkey Wildlife Federation. And we also work with a natural resource. They're called NREC. So we work with a handful of partners to, for conservation planning. Next slide, please. NRCS mission statement is we deliver conservation solutions so agriculture producers can protect the rural or protect natural resources and feed a growing world. So what we're doing is just trying to make sure that we hold the soil, hold these natural resources, that we can provide more or less a legacy and provide food for, generations to come. So what we do now is maybe, doesn't seem like a lot, but down the road, it's going to benefit quite a bit. A world of clean and abundant water, healthy soils, resilient landscapes, and thriving agriculture communities through voluntary conservation. And this means that, our conservation planning is actually open to available to everyone. And it's a free service. You're not really charged. We can help you design, like a pollinator plot on your land or in your backyard. We won't do any charging of that. We could go out and do some survey on your field. If there's a waterway that need to be surveyed, we go out there, do the survey and the engineering, and that's an absolutely free of charge service. We can develop, like, you're like, I'm having some issues with maybe nutrient management. Am I too high, too low? We can come out and develop a nutrient management plan, and that is free of charge service. Next slide, please. So what does NRCS provide? NRCS works with farmers, private landowners, and other partners to conserve soil and other natural resources. So also, like I was mentioning a previous slide, we provide like a toolbox to provide solutions on a particular resource concern. So if you have, let's say you have a lawn out there, it's really huge, you're like, I just don't want to mow it. We can come out there and say, okay, what are your goals? What are you looking to do? Well, I just don't want to mow a lot of this lawn. Well, we could provide, put a pollinator habitat out there, some native grasses, give those as suggestions. We could plant some trees and shrubs. I mean, if you're looking for bird habitat, or if you're looking for, deer or any type of habitat, we can help provide. And also on the soil erosion, if you have a gully coming through your field, what we can do is we can, provide different alternatives, as in, like, I'll be talking about different alternatives later in this presentation, but either putting in what we call the grass waterways, which are main, or water sediment control, just to slow down your soil erosion. Next slide, please. What is conservation planning? It is a natural resource problem solving and management process whose successes depends on the voluntary participation of clients. And it's, like I said, this is voluntary. You don't have to, come in the office. If we provide you with, information, you don't have to do that. It's not concrete. There's no contract signing. And it is also based on the premises that the conservation will make and implement sound decisions if they understand their resources, their natural resource concerns, the opportunities and the effects of their decisions. And there's going to be a cause and effect, like in the last, if you understand your resources, the resources of what the natural resource service or your local soil and water conservation service, they can be providing you with the toolbox to get to achieve your conservation goals, because there's going to be a kind of a cause and effect. So there's a cause out there and there's an effect, and it's a guide, to build through conservation. Next slide, please. The planning process is not just a straight linear. It's going to be a dynamic and interactive. Like the phase one is the collection and analysts. And what that's going to be is we're going to be out there out in the field with you, with a map. We'll have a soils map. We'll have maybe a topo map, and then we'll be walking with you to, where you can identify, like, hey, over here, I'm having some type of erosion, or it's not a productive area. We can either, we may, and this is where we're going to start talking about what opportunities, with the problems, like you're saying, hey, over in this corner here, it really doesn't yield that well. And we can say, okay, it's going to be maybe about 0.3 of an acre. And we kind of do a lot of the conservation planning steps are going to be maybe within one segment a little bit, but we'll talk about and say, maybe we'll plant just those grasses, because then you don't need to plant that to a crop. And that takes out, it'll cut down the amount of money you need to spend on that particular field. And then we can look at where you have erosion. We can, decide, okay, this could have potential these conservation practices. But we just kind of doing an analysis, just a kind of a approach of, okay, these are potential conservation practices, but then we're going to have to come back to the field office and work in a different potential phase where we come in and, do where we're inventorying the resources and analyzing the data. We're still in the phase 1. And we come in and do the survey and design. And then we go to phase 2 where we formulate the alternatives. We evaluate the alternatives with them. And then we make decisions. Now, the other thing is, we'll be like, well, I don't know if I want to do that because in parts of this conservation planning, you may change different. Your goals may shift a little bit. So that's why we do everything's, dynamic and interactive. And then phase 3, we do the application and evaluation where we, implement the plan. We provide the job sheets, we provide the maps, and you as a producer are given basically a folder of what you can do to implement your plan. And then after that, we come out, make sure it meets standard specs, and we also go ahead and see what the conservation practitioners are doing out there in phase 3, which is actually step 9 in there, where we evaluate and learn, see if this conservation practice worked. If it did, how can we improve upon it? Next slide, please. So what we also do is we look at all these natural resources or these resources when we're doing conservation planning. We look at the soils, we look at the water, we look at the air, we look at plants, animals, energy, and the human effect too. One thing is that energy has actually been something that has been added in the last 5 years. So we do look at that resource. How are we going to reduce the energy? We could look at reducing how many tillage passes. That would reduce the amount of fuel usage. We could be evaluating your farmstead and your shop to work to maybe put in more efficient lighting. We don't do a lot of that in Illinois, but that's one particular area that we could be working on with the energy focus. Next slide, please. Step 1, identify problems and opportunities. Identify existing resource problems and concerns and potential opportunities in the planning area. And in the planning area, that's out in the field. This is a step that that we always want to get out in the field, get boots on the ground, kind of get a feel of the land. Like I said, we'll probably have maps with us. We'll have an aerial map, a topo map, and a soils map. And having those, mainly the soils and the topo map, will give us a general feel how the land lays, what type of practices we can implement out there. One of the things with the soils map is we could look at what type of soil you have out there. Is it a loam? Is it something, does it have a lot of clay matter? Would a certain conservation practice work there? Is it sandy? We may need to look at those types of the soil texture because that can determine too, what type of structural conservation practice we use, or the other type is on a vegetation. So you may have a vegetative practice that will be better suited for a loamy soil rather than a sandy soil. Next slide, please. Step 2, we're going to determine the objectives. During this step, the farm operators / landowners, both of them can be out there. We're going to identify the objectives of them. The conservationist guides you through the process, so it includes your needs, the values, the resources, uses, and the on-site and off-site ecological protection. The objectives may need to be revised and modified as new information is learned later in the inventory and analysis stages. Like I said, everything's dynamic in here, so we may provide some different type of information. You may have an aha moment. Oh, maybe we need to go back. Your objectives change then. So the objectives may not be finalized until step 4 of the planning process. Next slide, please. So Step 3, inventory of the resources. Inventory and document the natural resources and their current on-site conditions, the effects, as well as the economic, social considerations of the related resources. Like for instance, you look here, they're walking through a gully. So we may be out there, and it's part of the collection and analysis is we may be identifying this resource. Okay, so this gully's here. So we may measure how wide it is, document how long it is, maybe document on the map where it starts, where it ends. And then we can use that to overlay on our topo map. And then we can, kind of like, will grass waterway work here, or will a water sediment control basin? And that depends on how the land lays and also on the producer's objectives too. Next slide, please. So step 4 is analyze data. Study the resource data and clearly define the existing conditions for all natural resources, including limitations, potential, and potential for desired use. This step is crucial in developing plans that will work for a landowner and their land, and it also provides a clear understanding of the baseline conditions and will help evaluate how effective a project is and after it has been implemented. So one of the things is, getting back to slide 3, the previous slide where we talked about that gully, we could, like I said, we could go with a grass waterway, or we could go with a water sediment control basin. It could be where the farm or the producer may be like, I don't want to take that much land out of production. So we could actually put like a water sediment control basin that can control that gully erosion. Another factor with maybe installing one of those is you may explain that, hey, there may not be as much maintenance with grass waterway. You may have to mow it at least a couple times a year just so it doesn't silt in from operation maintenance of the practice. So those are some things when we analyze, we're going to provide those alternatives too. Next slide, please. So we formulate alternatives. We achieve the goals for the land by solving and identifying all the problems. So we won't just look at the gully. We'll look at everything in taking advantage of opportunities and meeting the social, economic, and environmental needs. So what we would be doing is we'd be analyzing, looking at that gully erosion. We'd be looking at if there's any like runoff that is concerning for maybe potential nutrient management. The other area is we may look in the producer might say, yeah, I really don't get a lot of yield over there because I have shade. If there's timber over there, I have shade problems. We could maybe say, hey, we could put a potential grass practice over there that you wouldn't need to farm. And that in one sense is an economic opportunity because it enhances the soils over there and also lessens the cost of the producer to put a crop out there that is not going to produce a good return on investment. So we also do the best management, we call BMPs, best management practice. And like I said before, I talked about, the grass waterway. The other thing is what we do is we look at formulated alternatives with grass waterway. We may need where the outlet is, we might need to determine if there's going to need to be a grade stabilization structure. And then that will be further on in the process where we do some engineering. So, or we could actually seed it down to a critical area, just for, moving on. Step 6. So step 6, we evaluate the alternatives. The producer is always involved in this. We consider any possible or positive or detrimental side effects of practices of each alternative. The NRCS provides no less than 2 alternatives and what fits in the current situation. Like when we go back to, or if you remember back when we're in step 3, where I had the picture of the gully erosion, we'll provide where you can either do a grass waterway or you could do a water sediment control basin. It depends on the management, how involved the producer needs to be. It may involve a little bit if the payments on them, if by the time we get through the conservation practice or planning process, and it may determine what benefit or what installation of a conservation practice will help them out as far as the cost effectiveness. I mean, they may install one practice that might be a little higher than the other. So there's going to be alternatives way on that too. So, we're always talking the environmental and also the economical. Next slide, please. Step 7, we make decisions, and NRCS assists the client in making the decisions. We discuss the advantages and the disadvantages of each alternative, like I was talking about, like with the grass waterway versus a water sediment control basin. A water or grass waterway may have a lot of what we call operation and maintenance, where you need to mow it a couple, 3 times a year so it doesn't silt in. Whereas with water sediment control basin is basically a berm with a riser in front of it, is basically maybe need to do operation maintenance on it every 2 to 3 years instead of 3 times in 1 year. Then there's just different timelines. How, like when do you plan on maybe implementing this practice? Do you plan on implementing after the crops come off, or do you want to do it in early spring? We discuss the advantages and disadvantages of doing construction in the fall versus the spring, and then necessary documents to proceed at this stage. So those are going to be like your engineering forms, the conservation, and then there's going to be the conservation plan. Next slide, please. And then this is where we come in, where we implement the plan. The plan implementation is a process of carrying out the conservation treatments that make up the planned conservation system. The opportunities, the planner roles, and the customer roles. The opportunities we provide are what type of practices you want to do, what's going to benefit the current situation. Our planner roles are where the planner is going to prepare a map, where we give you just a basic map, and then there with conservation practices on it, we provide soil map and topo maps on it. And then we actually provide the conservation plan. And like what was mentioned in step 7, where there's timelines, there'll be timelines outlined in there. Like you want to, install, let's say, the tile for the grass waterway or water sediment control basin. You may want to do that in the fall. And then in the spring, you'll implement either one of those 2 practices, either if you chose a grass waterway or the water sediment control basins. The other thing is that we provide in this with implementation is we will probably have done what we call a cultural resources, make sure that we're not disturbing anything from, if there's a prehistoric Native American settlement, or if there was actually some type of structure back in, over 50 years ago. That's part of the planning process too, that we do when we work with the landowner, ask them if they know of any historical sites out there or historical buildings. Also in this, what we do is we'll design or provide the design for either the grass waterway or water sediment control basin, either one you have chosen. And we'll also, one of the things too is we'll provide in there too is call Julie before you dig too. That's one thing that we provide too, is being planners. And so then the customer role is that they need to obtain the permits. And what I mean by, like, if we're doing just our simple, I'm going to just use a grass waterway for an example. If you're doing a grass waterway, we'll probably be installing tile to support the vegetation growth of the grass waterway. So the tile, that's on the producer to call Julie to make sure that there's no, pipelines or anything like that. That is very important for them. That's for the customer to do. And then also they hire the contractor, they do that themselves. We usually provide a list that has, several contractors they can call and get different bids on that. The other thing, and then finally, they keep up on the operation and maintenance of the practice that they have built. And keeping up on the operation and maintenance actually provides a longevity for it. So a grass waterway, we like to see them, they have a practice lifespan of 10 years. So if you properly mow it, maintain it, that practice can actually probably live, or I should say exist, without having to reconstruct it for almost even 15 years if it's properly maintained. And then step 9 is evaluate the plan. Conservation plan is an ongoing process that continues long after implementation of a conservation practice. By evaluating the effectiveness of a conservation plan or a practice within a plan, stakeholders can decide whether to continue with other aspects of an overall area-wide plan. With that last statement, we may put a plan together and maybe you only want to implement 3 or 4 of the practices, or maybe just one of the practices. You may, and you just implement that practice and you're like, hey, I like that practice. It's been a few years. I now have farmed a couple, 3, I've built up some reserves. I'd like to implement these other practices to complete the conservation plan. A lot of times we set up conservation plans for a longevity of, let's say, a time, like I said, and like it shows in step 7, of different timelines. I mean, you may not want to, maybe this is the first one that's critical that you can actually try to implement. And then maybe 3, 4 years down the road, maybe there's more resources and more money available, either from your own or maybe through resources from either through your local soil and water district for cost share or your local NRCS that can help you complete the whole plan as a whole. So yeah, conservation planning it seems like a long process, but is not very difficult. With the staff we have very trained, good staff that will assist you along the way and make it very easy to implement a good conservation plan on your farm. We have resources here at our local soil and water district and the local NRCS office to provide you information to meet your conservation needs for today, tomorrow, and for the future. At this time, are there any questions?
So Dick, we have some that came in earlier. So the first one is, I don't think I have the skills to pull together a conservation plan by myself.
Nope. Okay.
Is that something your office does, or do I?
Yeah. That's what our office does. That's what we're here to. We're the ones with a lot of the skills to assist you to come up with the decisions, to give you the ideas to develop the conservation plan. That's what we've been trained to do.
Question from one of the participants here. It would be helpful on how to approach landowners and farmers to know, how do you talk to farmers and landowners to sell conservation? And then the other part of that question is understanding the process, forms, financial incentives, etc. It seems complicated. Can you give an example of a successfully implemented conservation plan?
And selling it is a lot of times there's local newspapers. The Farm Week provides hey, the NRCS is providing out gonna have I'm going to use EQIP as one of our flagship programs. They're going to have that, and they say stop by your local service center to your NRCS office to help you start a conservation plan and provide you with what type of financial opportunities are available to assist in implementing that conservation practice and conservation plan. The Soil and Water District, there's either through Facebook or any type of media too, that they may assist with, either have a sign up for doing conservation work too. So that's how it's usually, broadcast. The other thing is sometimes we are called out to a field, somebody has an erosion or has an issue, and we just go out there and we just start talking to someone. It's more of a word of mouth. I mean, we work with one producer and we talk to him and say, hey, we'd have you do this conservation, do this conservation practice, and he's really satisfied. So he talks to his neighbor. So then it's by word of mouth. As far as a successful conservation plan, I've worked with a numerous producers over the years that they come in, they have one issue that they want to work on, and yet I'm out there and I'm like, okay, so we're going to install this grass waterway. And then I said, hey, over here, it looks like it's difficult to farm. Do you mind enrolling that? Maybe we can grass this down. Maybe we can also put that into a different program. So, I mean, a lot of my, successfuls have been more word of mouth. They come in, they maybe have one problem, but then we get out there and we kind of build upon what other issues are out there and help them resolve and make their farm a more productive area.
When you enroll somebody in a particular farm bill plan, such as EQIP or CSP, what is the actual beginning? If they come in and say, I want to address just this problem, you actually do kind of that full plan ahead of just
Pretty
addressing that
much,
problem?
yeah. We look at just everything. We don't look. I mean, we do look at that one, but we always got to keep in mind that hey, this program has many more opportunities than, let's just say, a soil erosion, putting in a grass waterway. We may look at an area like in a corner and say, hey, maybe putting pollinator habitat, we can pay for that. And it helps them out also with in their ranking potentially. That's one other opportunity that we look at. We look at everything as a whole. We look at, where do they want to be in 10 years? So we put the whole plan together that way too.
And that actually provides an excellent little transition for us to talk about. We are going to be having a presentation next week that looks at using CSP and EQIP to achieve your farm's conservation goals. So if you're interested in understanding more specifics about how a particular program like CSP or EQIP the process for achieving that and getting in that program, please go ahead if you haven't already and register for that program. We would appreciate you stopping by, and Dick will be talking through the process there. Let's see, one more question. So, how do I know if I do a conservation plan, how often I should look at it and consider update? I mean, is it we do it, we see what happens, and then go forward? Or is there kind of you should look at it every 3 years, or you should look at it when you change crops? Or is there kind
Well,
of a rule on that?
there's never like a rule. Everything's voluntary. One of the things is if you're from a landowner perspective, or let's just say you're the landowner, you're a retiring farmer, you had a conservation plan, let's say developed 20 years ago, and you're bringing in either some new operator, could be a relative, or it could be some neighbor. And depending on maybe they farm in a different way you are, that would be a good opportunity to maybe update your conservation plan. The conservation plan can be updated like in part of my presentations, I said, there's going to be different determine different alternatives, and we'll be presenting different information. Whereas we may develop a conservation plan today and just do no-till, strip till, and putting in a grass waterway. Well, a couple years down the road, we may have that producer maybe like go to a conservation cropping seminar and say, hey, I would like to implement cover crops on my farm. And we're like, that's a good opportunity. So we can update the plan there. Or they may want to, maybe they are looking at, maybe they get a soil test back and like, oh, I might need to change up my nutrient management. Do you think we can maybe change something here? So it depends on if they're changing their even their operation. So there's no timeline, as I shouldn't say timeline. There's no like every 5 years you should update it or every 2 years. No, it's when it's an ongoing process. So it's not definitive, I should say. It's dynamic, like a conservation plan should be, fluid.
Okay, thanks. We have one more question here, it looks like. I get a nutrient plan from my ag business partners.
Yeah.
How does that fit into something like this, like a conservation plan for my whole farm? How do I combine the two?
Well, what you could do is you could be looking at if you get one from your ag retailer and they have their prescription, you could bring it in to our field office and say, hey, this is what the prescription of nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium is this something in line with what the U of I with the NRCS is? As far as, and I don't want to make sure this sounds regulatory, this is all voluntary. You could come in saying, am I in line? How well is this going to work if I want to implement a nutrient management plan with the NRCS? So we can evaluate that. And it's all up to you. I mean, we can evaluate up, say, well, maybe you could add more nitrogen or less nitrogen. I mean, we can give a little, we're kind of somewhat like the extension too, and we can provide sound advice too, just to make sure that you're, in assurance for yourself. So
Kind of like a second opinion.
second opinion, we're more than happy to provide a second opinion.
Thanks, Dick, for talking with us today. The last item we have are a couple of links where you can access some additional resources that will assist you, if you're a farmer or landowner, or an advisor to farmers, in developing a conservation plan. As Dick mentioned in his presentation, reach out to your local Soil and Water Conservation District or NRCS staff if you need help with writing and implementing a conservation plan for your farm. Thank you for joining us today.